الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Today we're doing Surah Az-Zukhruf verse 43. Surah Az-Zukhruf chapter 43, right? Ayah 1. You have it, brother? After?
You got it?
No, I don't.
677.
670.
Surah Az-Zukhruf.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
حميم
آمين.
والكتاب المبين.
والكتاب المبين.
إنا جعلناه
جعلناه
قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون.
قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون.
وإنه في أم الكتاب لدينا لعلي حكيم. أفنضرب عنكم الذكر صفحا أن كنتم قوما مسرفين. وكم أرسلنا من نبي في الأولين وما يأتيهم من نبي إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. فأهلكنا أشد منهم بطشا ومضى مثل الأولين. ولئن سألتهم من خلق السماوات والأرض ليقولن خلقهن العزيز العليم. الذي جعل لكم الأرض مهدا وجعل لكم فيها سبلا لعلكم تهتدون. والذي نزل من السماء ماء بقدر فأنشرنا به بلدة ميتا كذلك تخرجون. والذي خلق الأزواج كلها وجعل لكم من الفلك والأنعام ما تركبون لتستووا على ظهوره ثم تذكروا نعمة ربكم إذا استويتم عليه وتقولوا سبحان الذي سخر لنا هذا وما كنا له مقرنين وإنا إلى ربنا لمنقلبون. وجعلوا له من عباده جزءا إن الإنسان لكفور مبين. أم اتخذ مما يخلق بنات وأصفاكم بالبنين. وإذا بشر أحدهم بما ضرب للرحمن مثلا ظل وجهه مسودا وهو كظيم. أومن ينشأ في الحلية وهو في الخصام غير مبين. وجعلوا الملائكة الذين هم عباد الرحمن إناثا أشهدوا خلقهم ستكتب شهادتهم
ستكتب شهادتهم
ويسألون
ويسألون
وقالوا
وقالوا
لو شاء الرحمن
لو شاء الرحمن
ما عبدناهم
ما عبدناهم
ما لهم بذلك
ما لهم بذلك
من علم
من علم
إنهم
إنهم
إلا يخرصون
إلا يخرصون
أم آتيناهم
أم آتيناهم
كتابا من قبله
كتابا من قبله
فهم به
فهم به
مستمسكون
مستمسكون
بل قالوا
بل قالوا
إنا وجدنا
إنا وجدنا
آباءنا
آباءنا
على أمة
على أمة
وإنا على
وإنا على
آثارهم مهتدون
آثارهم مهتدون.
صدق الله مولانا العظيم. Let's close the door. Alhamdulillah, all praise for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most gracious, most merciful. And we wish peace and durood upon Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May peace be upon all those who follow the straight path. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come to his home and pray inshallah, one or two salats in jama'ah together and be here and to be able to reflect upon these verses today. I've recited before you, we recited together 22 verses, okay, from this new surah, okay, Surah Az-Zukhruf. So this surah Az-Zukhruf is a Makki surah, and it's the fourth Hawamim. So there are seven surahs that are called Hawamim, as-Sab'a. They're Makki surahs, they were revealed in one instance. Normally, Quranic revelations are revealed parts of it, and then they're placed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These ones, they're the way they're here in the Quran. That's the way they were revealed. Okay, so we are on the fourth one, and the word Zukhruf, the name of it, Zukhruf means gold plated gold. Also, sometimes they just write gold, but gold plated. Do you guys know what gold plated is? So it's not real gold, right? It could be a different metal underneath. So they just color it with golden color, or in the Urdu language they call it. I've written here. Suneri. In Urdu, they call it Suneri. Suneri means gold-plated. Okay. So this is called gold-plated. This could be maybe because at the beginning few pages there is some mention of Zukhruf there. Also elsewhere in the Quran uses the word Zukhruf like this: Zukhruf al-qawli ghurura, gold-plated speech of deception. The idea behind gold-plated is that something that looks good outward, but the inside is nothing. So it says gold-plated speech of deception. There's like a phrase like that in the Quran. And then, so basically the idea is the outward is great looking, but the inward there's nothing there. Allahumma hafazna, Allah protect us from that. From that being the reality, right? Your inner self has to be better. Also, since this is a Makki surah, the themes of this surah, topics, is going to try to prove to you the truthfulness of revelation, that this revelation is a true revelation, that prophets are true. This is a common theme in all the Meccan surahs, okay? They're going to do that here. They're going to try to tell you that the message is true. They're going to provide you evidences for that. Also about the promised time, Qiyam. Also, the surah also has ahkam, some rulings in it as well. So let's read the first verse. The first verse reads, Hamim. Right? So this is something, a secret between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knows, but we don't know. Or this is the secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal kitabil mubin, the second verse. I swear by the manifest book. So this is an oath. But whenever you take an oath, it's to emphasize something, right? And the oath is not important. It's what you say afterward. Like I swear by Allah something, right? So whatever that something is, in Arabic it's called Jawabul Qasam. It's like the answer to the oath. So the oath here is Wal Kitab al-Mubin, I swear by the manifest book. So manifest book is another name of Quran. Remember we studied last Sunday that we were here? The Quran was called Ruh. Remember that? Now you know another name. It's called manifest book. Manifest book means it makes everything manifest. It clarifies everything. So in the Quran, there is clear mention of the beliefs and some actions and the akhlaq, the manners. Right? There's only three aspects of Islam: manners, actions, and beliefs. It clearly tells you everything. Doesn't leave anyone in darkness in regards to beliefs. Like any past, there's no beliefs of Islam that are like in darkness. We're not sure what they are. We know what they are. And no a'mal that are in darkness. So it's a manifest book. It tells everything in detail. Now, the detail may not be in some verse. So you might be reading a verse of the Quran. I'm just going to elaborate on this, okay? Today, there'll be a lot of elaboration on some parts. So sometimes in the Quran, you may not find elaboration somewhere, but the elaboration for that is elsewhere. So it's not here. You may need it here, but it's not here in this verse. You needed some more explanation, but you find that explanation elsewhere. Also, this, when it says it's a manifest book, it makes everything clear. How does it make everything clear? First of all, it makes clear to the Quran. So Quran, some of the Quran, sometimes when it's not clear, you use other parts of the Quran to do tafseer of it. That's why it manifests itself like that. So if you do tafseer of Quran with Quran, right, it'll manifest itself. All the beliefs and whatever you, as a human need that you have of revelation, it'll make those things clear to you. And the second source is total 4. It's a hierarchy. So first you look, the Quran will explain Quran to you. Then the hadith will explain ahadith. All the ahadith of the explanation of the Quran. Every hadith. Then a question arises, how many ahadith are there? So how many ahadith are there? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullah alayh, we have a quote from him. You guys know Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal? No? The fourth Imam of fiqh, Imam Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So he says it's 4,400. That's it. He says hadith are 4,400. That's it. Then some other scholars in their book, they've written the hadith, I know 32,000. So one may ask, well, is it 4,000 or is it 32,000? The 32,000 is because is if you take the repeats into account. Sometimes there's different wordings. So if you the different hadith with slightly different wordings, if you count them as different hadith, then you get to the number 32,000. Makes sense? Then there are some people, some muhaddithin, not people, muhaddithin, hadith experts, they will tell you that no, hadith are 100,000. Those are three different statements, right? 4,000, 32,000, and now we're getting to 100,000. The reason 100,000 is sometimes there's one sahabi who's narrated the same hadith, and like there's 10 sahabi who are narrating one hadith. So is that 10 hadith or is that one? So some muhaddithin call that 10. They want like, okay, this Abdurrahman said this hadith, they'll put the whole hadith back down again. Umar radiallahu anhu said this hadith, so they'll put that whole hadith back down again. You get it? So then you multiply everything. That's how you get numbers, hundreds and thousands. So all these are true. Somebody says hadith of 4,000, somebody says 32,000, and somebody says 100,000. You will say that all these comments are true because it means differently. Make sense? And there's many books of hadith. The common misconception is that it's only Bukhari and Muslim, but there are many hadith, and you can't deny any hadith. Okay. So, and the book with the most hadith is Kanzul Ummal, like that. So that's a book like maybe you never even heard his name, right? So that has the most hadith there, and then there's different grades of it. So all those, so whether it's 4,000, whether it's 32,000, whether it's 100,000, whatever you want to call it, they are the explanations of Quran. So you see how this is a manifest book. It's making itself clear. Then after that, what if something is still not clear? Then aqwalu sahaba. Then the Sahaba Qu'ran, they will explain to you something you still can't understand from the Quran, and you take the hadith into consideration, you still don't understand it. Sahaba will tell you how to understand it. What if you still don't understand it? So Sahaba, that means golden period. Tabi'een, Sahaba, we can put them into one category. Then Qawlul Mujtahideen, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i. Understand? That's also part of the tafsir. They will explain certain verses that you still don't understand it. If you take into consideration the Quran, the hadith, or the golden period, and then you still need some other help just to be able to say, is it this or that? Just to be manifest, for it to be absolutely clear. So you need the Mujtahideen. Okay, so this is the hierarchy. Usually when people misinterpret the Quran or an Islamic concept, the reason is they're breaking this hierarchy. Somewhere in there, they're not considering something. And so they may take a hadith or something, and then they're not taking what the Sahaba thought about it. They're not taking what the Mujtahideen said about it. And now that's called misinterpretation. You have to be aligned over there, okay, between these four methods of how this Quran becomes manifest. All these teachings are very manifest. And then you know that the interesting things about the Quranic teachings, they're very clear. They're very clear. You just need to amal upon it. Like if there's sincere public who wants to do amal upon Islam, Islam is not difficult. You will be told exactly what needs to happen. There's not. We just don't study Islam from the right sources. And then we get into these puzzles, or no, the Na'uzubillah, Islam deen is difficult. We don't understand it. Wo to ye kehte hain, aur wo ye kehte hain, right? You guys, Pakistani people make that comment. Again, wo to ye keh rahe the, wo ye keh rahe the. All that stuff, that's not the reality of the deen. It's just because maybe you're not studying from the right sources. You don't have no way to understand. But this deen is very simple. So that the layman could easily, I think the underlying reason is because I think we're lazy. So a human being doesn't want to do amal upon it. So he stays back. But if he wants to sincerely do amal upon the deen, he could be shown the path. I think this manifest book will be able to give him that path. Then moving on. That was the oath, right? That was just the oath. Now what's coming up next? The next sentence is Jawabul Qasam. What is the oath about? Inna ja'alnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan. We have made this Qur'an an Arabic Qur'an so that you understand. So we have made it an Arabic Qur'an. So that's pointed out that it's an Arabic Qur'an. What's the significance of Arabic? It's a comprehensive language. It's a Jami' language. It's the richest language in the world. Richest language in the world. And it's preserved. It's preserved. It's well preserved over time. It's also known as a forever language. Because if you look in history, languages, they are born and then they die out. Certain hundreds of years, people completely dies out, or they change. Right? It's just a matter of hundreds of years, and they change. But the language that's like a forever language, it's one of the longest, like in thousands and thousands of years that we have traces of it, is Arabic language. Okay. Also, it's a sweet language. You get it? It has sweetness to it. Also, it's a divine language. Meaning that, like whenever there's a country or any people who are in a superpower position, right? If they're ruling the world, what's one of the things that they're going to do? They're going to make the language that they like become international language. Everybody has to speak their language because they're superpower. So what's the language of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The one that is accepted up there is Arabic. Do you get? So Arabic language is very, very special. Divine language, a forever language, a sweet language. It's grammar. It's preserved. Its grammar is very eloquent compared to other grammars. It's very solid grammar. Languages have something called extra words, unnecessary words, extra words. It lacks that. It doesn't have extra words. Everything has meaning to the letter. Sometimes even like word, like kitab, even scholars have gone into a science of trying to understand why kaf is there, what ta is, and what does that have to do with the book. You get it? Each letters have something to do with the book. So it's a very meaningful letter by letter language. May Allah give us tawfiq to study it. I'm coming to that in a second. Then Arabic language is fasih and baligh. These are two Arabic terms, fasih and baligh. Fasih means it's clear. Fasih means clear. Language should be clear. And the other is baligh. Baligh means that it affects people. So Arabic is the most in terms of fasaha and balagha. It's something that's clear. If you understood Arabic, it will be very clear to you, that writing, and it'll be very effective. Now, after having said all these facts about Arabic, now think that how lucky we are with the Quran being in Arabic. Imagine that now. Look how great, the greatest language in the world, the divine language, and then it's already effective even if it wasn't Quran. If you're doing, poetry of Arabic, it would have been effective on people. So imagine now you have the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unaltered. Imagine how much effect that has. And then if you read it with tajweed. So, then after that, so that you understand. So we should, this Arabic language, obviously there's some hukuk of the Quran, right? We're so blessed with this Quran. One is reading of it, understanding it. We have to study Islam, our lifetime. Because studying the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it needs to nourish us throughout our lifetime. It makes our pathway to Jannah easy. So children, we recommend that they're in maktab. They're in maktab. The learning that you guys do is called maktab. So the traditional program, since thousands of years, there's different statements in history who started maktab, but the maktab system, the idea that children study Quran, go to the masjid and constantly study Quran. And how much do Muslims read Quran? Right? The children read Quran, then the whole Ramadan is all about Quran, and then the recital of it is a big part of our worship, and then a source of rahmah for us. Also, besides being in maktab when children are young, that they get all their foundation, they read Quran, they memorize Quran much as they can. After that, we should focus on learning this language. Since it's such a great language and it gives us a direct connection to the Quran. Learning Arabic language is mustahab. The ruling of it is mustahab. It's not farz ayn, everybody does not have to learn it, but it's mustahab. Highly, it's recommended. Prophet ﷺ has said ahadith. There are some ahadith. Some scholars have compiled like 10, 12, 20 ahadith. I'll give you one hadith about Prophet ﷺ telling us about the greatness of Arabic language. He said in that hadith, there are three things. I'll just mention two things from it. He said, love Arabs. He said, generally just love Arabs because I'm Arab. So obviously the Arab community has that one because Rasulullah was from their community. So you should respect an Arab just on that. That's like one credit. He's from the same lineage in a way. He said also love Arabic because I'm Arab. Love Arabic because I'm Arab. Next verse. وَإِنَّهُ فِي أُمِّ الْكِتَابِ, and verily it is in the mother of books, meaning the preserved tablet. So the mushrikeen, they would accuse Na'uz billah that Rasulullah was making all this up. That he was going around and he looked at the Bible and all that, and he came up with a very nice Quran. Na'uz billah. So this verse refutes that and it says, no, this is actually preserved in Lawh Mahfuz. Like you're talking about he made it up? No, this is so divine, so great, so high that it is. إِنَّهُ فِي أُمِّ الْكِتَابِ لَدَيْنَا. It's with us in the preserved tablet. You know where everything is written? The Quran is written there. Okay, لَعَلِيٌّ Hakim, and it's very high. And it's Hakim. Hakim means strong. It also means strong. Hakim can also mean wise. The next verse. أَفَنَضْرِبُ عَنْكُمُ الذِّكْرَ صَفْحًا أَنْ كُنْتُمْ قَوْمَ مُسْرِفِينَ. Shall we take this reminder away from you because you're being so unjust? Like the idea was that mushrikeen, kept causing, they didn't want to hear the Quran. And they were just causing mischief. And that's the nature of evil in the world. But the true deen, they do that. They cause mischief. They do zulm. So they were being told that, shall we take it away? Shall we take this revelation away? So the indirect message of this verse is that, believe it or not, we will continue to recite it to you. Understand? So whether people believe it or not, whatever happens in the world, this is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and its teaching and this revelation will continue to be taught. And those people who are jealous, who are jealous, they're just going to keep burning out of jealousy from this, but that's not going to stop people reading the Quran. Also, there's a lesson in this verse that you should keep giving da'wah. The fact that it's saying that, because there's injustice, so shall the Quran close down now because there's too much injustice, right? Nobody wants to follow. It's too little people want to follow it. Majority don't want to follow it. So I think we should shut this program down. It's saying, no, that's not the way the world works. Since this world is a test, understand? This book will just continue. Some people are just going to continue. It's just going to continue. It's part of the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one lesson here is that when it comes to da'wah, inviting people to Islam for their betterment, you should continue doing it. Whether you're inviting a non-Muslim to tell them something about Islam, or if it's a Muslim, you're trying to do their islah, you're trying to tell them something positive, you should never stop in your lifetime. You continue doing it. And I'll tell you a thing on that. Mufti Shafi Sahib, rahmatullahi alayhi, was a big scholar. He says that, how in Islam, you're allowed to preach, although you don't practice, right? You're allowed to tell people good things, although you're very weak at your own act, as long as you have the intention to practice. And Mufti Shafi Rahmatullah says that the da'wah, when you're telling people about Islam and telling people about positive things, the barakah of that is that you'll start to do it yourself. Do you get it, Faz? What do you get from it? That means you keep telling people positive things, right? So be in the business of doing something positive, telling something positive, although you see no change happening. Continue doing it. The barakah, the blessing of that is you will observe it. You'll end up observing it. That's a great accomplishment on its own self. Makes sense? So Muslims should continue speaking positivity, whatever is right, whatever they know 100%, confirm that this is right, you should say it. And when it comes to doing da'wah, you should only say that which you know. who say something beyond what you know. Say things that are confirmed, things that are known. It's like something, Allah Subhanahu says that in the Quran. See, people sometimes say, I don't want to talk about deen, it's so controversial. It's because you always talk about controversial things, that's why it's so controversial. Why don't you say something everybody agrees to? You have to say something nice that people might get islah through it, and it's something that nobody can deny. So use wisdom and say those things, and Allah commands us in the Quran. And also remember, da'wah is a gift. When you're telling somebody, inviting them to the masjid, right? Da'wah is a gift. So how much gifts should you give people? Right? Gifts are something you can do constant. So similarly, da'wah you can always do. Throughout your lifetime, you can do them constant. But just remember, don't do da'wah in the wrong way. Meaning don't annoy someone. If you do da'wah in completely the wrong way, that means like you're annoying someone. They might just become so annoyed and they go, no, we're not coming to the masjid. Right? Na'uzubillah, they might just become, right? People become arrogant, right? You tell them something too much. They get frustrated, they don't want to hear it. They're like, I'm not coming. So don't do it like that. Do it with hikmah. Then the next verse. وَكَمْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِن نَبِيٍّ فِي الْأَوَّلِينَ. And how many messengers we have sent to the earlier people? Plus, exclamation mark. How many messengers we have sent to the earlier people? That meaning that this da'wah of Rasulullah that you're communicating to them, we kept sending so many prophets. How many prophets have we sent? And this is not something new. And the prophets always do da'wah. They continue to do da'wah, although their community, and we know the stories, right? What happened to those prophets? How disheartened. We know Ibrahim alayhi salam. How many people do you think was Ibrahim alayhi salam when he was migrating? Right? When he was migrating, right? What kind of people did he have with him? How many? Like that. So, but he continues. And in our ummah, you have the waratha of the Prophet, the ulama. You have the ulama. How many ulama do you have? Allah. Alhamdulillah, Allah. And then they have actual chains going back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to respect that. To respect that. Don't be like the, how the people with the nabis, don't be like that with the ulama. You have to be humble with the ulama. People, I'm telling you, you'll be shocked when you see the Muslim communities. Their reaction to ulama is not like it's sometimes it's not sound, it's not right. So because the ulama are the waratha of anbiya, they're the heirs of the Prophet. Then do heirs leave anything behind? When inheritance being distributed, you distribute everything, right? The last penny, they're like, who does this penny belong to? So some family member takes that penny at the end. You take everything. So the ulama are the warith of the anbiya. Do you think anything? And then the prophets don't leave behind money, they leave behind ilm. So do you think they left something? They take it. So we have to respect ulama, love them, be with them, support them. Understand? Something very, very important. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the giver. Ulama are the means. What are they? It's the means. Just like Quran is the means of hidayah. Masajid are the means of hidayah. Ulama are the means of hidayah. Depending on how sincere you are, you will get. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can sometimes make the student more mightier than the teacher. Can't he? Don't we have in history so many times that the student surpassed the teacher? Yeah. And it's because the teacher is like the window of the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you were very sincere, you would probably achieve from any kind of teacher as long as you were sincere. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. Then the next verse, وَمَا يَأْتِيهِم مِّن نَبِيٍّ.
I just did.
Okay. And there has not been a prophet إِلَّا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ, except that they were mocked. There has not been any prophet except they were mocked. It just says mocked here, but we know from history, not just mocked. They were, they were harmed in all ways, right? Psychologically, physically, they were mocked and harmed in all kinds of ways. And nabis and ulama, and what about ulama? Ulama too, if we look in our history, they've gone through so much hardship but they went through it. See, even the ulama, because they're the waratha of the Nabi. Now, see, Bani Israel Qawm was different than us. Bani Israel Qawm had left and right, they didn't have ulama, they had Nabis. Left and right, they had Nabis. This ummah is different, they have ulama. And so, they're different in their status, but they do a lot for the community. And they do a lot for the community, they toil, and what they get from the community, nothing but harm. Understand? So may Allah not make us of that. May Allah make us their supporters. Be with them, work with them, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless us, inshallah. Where are we? So they were mocked. فَأَهْلَكْنَا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ بَطْشًا. So we destroyed the more stronger of them in power. We destroyed the more stronger of them in power. Meaning that every community, they mock their prophet. The truth comes, it never goes away. The world constantly does all these evil things. Doesn't matter. The truth will constantly be spoken. And then we've destroyed, not talking to the mushrikeen of Makkah, that we destroyed people who are more stronger than you in power. وَمَضَى مَثَلُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And the example of the earlier people has already passed. Meaning that, read history. Read history. So telling the mushrikeen that you are denying the message of, you're making fun of Islam and like mushrikeen, you're much weaker. The guys before you, they're much more stronger. They're much more mightier. And in fact, if we look at it from today's perspective, the nations that were destroyed previous by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're much stronger than even the nations that we have today. They were even more severe. Understand? In some ways, they were severe. So we have to read history. It says, look, their examples have passed before you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this as a test, right? So there's going to be evil, there's going to be goodness. So then after that, the next verses are about the Dala'il Tawheed, the proofs of Tawheed, the proof of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next few verses will be like that. Now, before we speak about Tawheed, let me tell you something about Tawheed. Do you guys know what Tawheed is? Tawheed, there's oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, monotheism. Okay, that's Tawheed. Muslims believe in Tawheed. Actually, our belief system, our Aqidah, sometimes Aqidah is just called Tawheed, Ilmu Tawheed, the knowledge of Tawheed. The reason is that all our beliefs, the most important beliefs is the one creator. You get it? That's why the Islamic belief system is sometimes just called Ilmu Tawheed, the knowledge of the oneness of Allah. Now, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 4 components. Okay? The whole planet already agrees to 2 components of it. By default, everybody agrees to 2 components, but Muslims agree to all the 4 components. So what are those 4 components of Tawheed? The first one is that there's one creator. One creator, right? Who created the system. So everyone agrees on that. The higher power, they call it nature, they call it whatever, but there's the higher power, right? So everybody agrees to that. Other religions as well. Then the second is wajibul wujud. Wajibul wujud is he had to exist on his own. I mean, because he created everything, so obviously this creation didn't create him. He's wajibul wujud. Wajibul wujud means that he's in existence on his own, not that something created it. This part, everybody agrees. These 2. The next 2, they don't. So like the third one we're about to mention, the mushrikeen get cut off here. The third point is mudabbir. Allah is mudabbir. Mudabbir means everything is in plan. He's planned all this out. It's not like random occurrences. These are all planned. So the mushriks, they say, no, it's not planned out. That's where the atheists and the mushrikeen drop out. And the fourth point is worship. Who should you worship? So Muslims say, well, the one who created everything and who's all powerful, he's the only one who should be worshipped. No one else should be worshipped. Plus, he said that in his book anyway. But they say, no, other people could be worshipped. Oh, and also back to the third one. When they say mudabbir, they say, oh, the creator, but there's other people who are doing things. So that's why the idea of shirk, right? You believe in other entities that also do things. Everything is not in the control of Allah. You get it? Some control is in other people's hands. So we say, no, mudabbir is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the ibadah is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, that's our tawheed, the complete tawheed. So the verse says, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ, that if you ask the mushriks, مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, who created the heavens and the earth? لَيَقُولُنَّ, they would say, خَلَقَهُنَّ الْعَزِيزُ الْعَلِيمُ, they have been created by the most powerful and the all-knowledgeable. They've been created by the most powerful and the most knowledgeable. The mushrikeen would confess that. And in different verses of the Quran, that they would say that Allah SWT created. But see, so believing in Allah is not a problem, but they believed in other things as well. Then the next verse, verse 10. الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ مَهْدًا. Who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He's the one who created for you the earth as a cradle. That's an interesting description. He's made the earth like a cradle. You take the care of the baby in the cradle. So create the earth like a cradle. You're nicely being taken care of. All you have to do is just worship and be obedient. Take from the halal, don't take from the haram. So Allah has created the earth for you like a cradle. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ فِيهَا السُّبُلَ, and we have made for you pathways. That's how you go around this world. So imagine, like, if we didn't have these roads, just the blessing of roads, and you can't even get anywhere. You can't even move. That's how we can easily, right, travel throughout countries, visit it. I think some of it is hard. Then we need soft ground for plantation. Then we need hard ground to build. The whole earth is just suitable that we are able to, live very conveniently. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. So he's saying that we made these roads so that you can go places. So that is your Lord, the one who's facilitated all this for you, roadways and traveling, and he's done all that for you. وَالَّذِي نَزَّلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. And then who's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He's the one who sends down water from the sky بِقَدَرٍ, in due measure. He sends down water in due measure. What a big sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Due measure. If you just look at the rain, right, just the drops. Why does it have to be a drop? Why can't it be just like when you turn your tap on, right? And it's coming from that height. And then if it was more stronger, it'd probably destroy our houses. You'd have problems. It's sending it to you in those drops. And then if you look at the snow, right? There's all these articles and pictures on Google how that's a miracle. All the flakes, aren't they in a particular design? Who's designing all this? So Allah was saying, but this is me. So you have to worship me. The purpose of man's life is, that there's only one verse of the Quran that clearly tells the purpose of life is to worship your Lord. But the other tafseer of that verse is to know your Lord. You get it? You grow up just knowing your Lord. So you pass knowing your Lord even better. That's what worship is. Worship and ilm, you get the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the recognition. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us. Also, when it's talking about water, we know about the water cycle. What about the water cycle? How do we get clouds, right? How does that water go up, right? And then it forms clouds after that. So what if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't let it go up? What if it didn't go up? Then in the lands, we're not going to have rain. Then you're going to have drought. So who's allowing that water cycle to happen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's your creator. Okay? And then فَأَنْشَرْنَا بِهِ بَلْدَةً مَيْتًا. So when he sends down water, then we revive with it a dead town. Like that, you will be revived. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we send down water and things come to life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to think about that. That how does he send down water and things come back to life? Like that, we will raise you. So an example of that, when you put a seed in the ground, I'm not sure if you put a seed in the ground, right? Like seeds are hard, right? Like a date seed. So you put those seeds, they're solid, they're rock hard. And you put them in the ground, then what happens? It breaks. You put them in the soft earth, the hard seed, and then it's going to break. And then it's going to produce. Like that. So Allah Ta'ala says that, like when we die in the earth, we're a corpse. So you're also like a seed of a date. You're hard. And so your bones they're stiff. You put in the earth. Then when people think that how is Allah going to build up, how does the seed come out? How does Allah bring the seed up? Similarly, He'll bring the human beings up some second time. And for Him to do it a second time is much easier than doing it the first time. Then after that, He's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one. خَلَقَ الْأَزْوَاجِ. He created pairs. Everything in pairs. Right? Human being nature is what? Man and woman, right? Husband and wife. And just everything is in pairs. Darkness and light. Everything is pairs. Animals created in pairs. Everything is created in pairs. You have your pair of hands. Everything is your two eyes. Everything is created in pairs. This is just his signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that. Okay. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ. And He created for you. And all these words are not really created. The word is ja'ala. It's different than create. He's like, these are your gifts. All along, everything He's telling you means these are your gifts. And you have to, the price of all this is that you have to recognize. You have to worship your creator, not be deceived. And he made for you as gifts the boats and the cattle so that you may ride them. Now, when I mention this, it's very interesting. It uses two words. Boats, to ride on, is going to give you two things. Boats and cattle. So the ulama take from that when I said cattle, it means things that the rides that He's made for us, that it had nothing to do with humans. And when it says boats, it had to do with humans. You get it? So both are really who gave it to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who gave you your car? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But although you say, well, humans engineered it. But who gave the human being the brain to engineer it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So both, every ride that human beings, so this verse actually includes any any invention that human beings will do that you ride on, this verse is relevant to it. Because he already gave you 2 examples. And it's very interesting, it said the word boat. What if it said airplanes then? What if it said airplane? The problem with saying airplanes is that the first 200, 300 years when the Quran was revealed, all people would have a hard time having to believe in that. They said airplanes, we never seen airplanes. Who said we were going to have airplanes? What airplanes? How can human beings take all that metal go in the sky? It's impossible. You would have had like what, 400 years? When was the airplanes invented, right? You would have 500, 600 years of people not having a hard time believing because it's airplanes. But it gave the example of what was relevant to the people who the Quran was revealed to. To them, the only the thing that the ride that they knew of that was high tech was the boats. But this verse could be obviously applicable till the end. Then it says, لِتَسْتَوُوا عَلَى ظُهُورِهِ ثُمَّ So we gave you these rides as ni'mats so that you may sit on them and get fixed on them. ثُمَّ تَذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ رَبِّكُمْ Then you should mention the blessing of your Lord. You should remember the ni'mah of your Lord. So do we do that when you sit on your ride, your bicycle, whatever you have? You sit on that ride and you think about the ni'mah of your Lord. إِذَا اسْتَوَيْتُمْ عَلَيْهِ When you sit firmly on it, وَتَقُولُوا And that you should say. I gave you these rides because there's in the animal kingdom, right? Some of the animals just drag themselves. They don't have no ride is something that's just for us. Human beings have that. Animals develop rides? Not yet. They're working on it. Animals developing rides. They don't have rides, the animals. They never get a ride. But human beings are the only one who's honored with to be able to ride something. We ride animals and we ride things that we've engineered with our own minds. So it says that these are ni'mat. I've allowed you to do that so that you can live like in this way, in the superior way, because you are the ashraful makhluqat. But then you should say the following: Subhanalladhi sakhkhara lana hadha wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin wa inna ila rabbina lamunqalibun. Right? Everyone knows this dua, traveling dua. The dua translates Subhanalladhi, that perfect is the one who has subjugated this to us, وَمَا كُنَّا لَهُ مُقْرِنِينَ and we were not able to have control over it. Right? What are the chances we're going to have control over it? If the horse had any more intellect, it would never let me and you ride it. Right? Why would it let you? It's so strong. One horsepower. How many horsepower are you? How many horsepower are we? 0? And how much is a horsepower? 1 horsepower. So why would that 1 horsepower let you ride him? He should be riding you. But Allah SWT has allowed you subject. Look at the other machine. Look at the cars. Look at the airplane. And man has control over it. Right? Who gave you that power? And our cars are how many horsepower? Depends what you drive. What, 200? 260 horsepower? That's good enough. After that, how many horsepower does your car have?
No idea.
No idea. Okay, you go home and you find out. So 1 horse, you can't even imagine how you're gonna have control over 1 horse. And then your cars have how much horsepower? So how could you sit in that car and then be arrogant? Who gave you that capability and you drive it? And then imagine driving it. So it's saying sit on top of it and then say subhanallah. Imagine what's the opposite, being arrogant. Sitting on top of it and then being arrogant with doing disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave you those capabilities. Imagine see where that puts man. All that power and your ability, and then for you to forget your creator, it puts you in a very bad position. Make sense? So we read this dua. And then we say, وَمَا كُنَّا لَهُ مُقْرِنِينَ We couldn't have control over it. وَإِنَّا إِلَىٰ رَبِّنَا لَمُنْقَلِبُونَ And we're all going to return to him. So everyone's going to return to him. The animals, all the rides that we have, everything's going to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that, وَجَعْ So that's it. That was about Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing a shikwa. In Urdu it's called shikwa. Okay, how do we say this in English? Shikwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all this, but this is how man behaves. This is what man ends up doing. وَجَعَلُوا لَهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ جُزْءًا They make for him from his servants parts. Very human being is very ungrateful. Man is clearly ungrateful. It's talking about doing shirk. They're saying that once we have given you all this, why should you turn to here and there, and why aren't you really loyal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because the mushriks were doing that, right? They're being reminded that you have all these blessings and you're doing shirk. And then after that is now the next few verses that we're going to do up till verse 22 is just psychology. It's just talking to the mushriks and about their psychology, the problem with their thinking, how they think, and what's wrong with it. So the first verse after that. أَمِ اتَّخَذَ مِمَّا يَخْلُقُ بَنَاتٍ وَأَصْفَاكُمْ بِالْبَنِينَ. Is it that they take for what he creates daughters, and they have chosen, and he has chosen for you sons? Is it that he has adopted daughters from those whom he has created and chosen for you having sons? The mushrikeen would say that the angels are the daughters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's telling them that, and the mushriks, the mushrikeen in Makkah, they had a habit, they didn't like, in their culture, they didn't like girls. They would bury them alive. In their culture, they didn't like girls. But when they were talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels don't even have a male and female. But they would say that the angels are daughters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's saying that, it's just revealing their psychology, that why are you, something that you don't like daughters yourself. How come you're pointing that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Telling them. It's something to think about. And then after that, the next verse, وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى. And when one of them is given a news for that which they have given the similitude to the most merciful of, ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ, their faces become darkened and they start choking. It's saying that, the mushriks, when they used to have a news that, at my home, I got a baby, and it's a girl, they would start becoming very embarrassed on that. So that was their negative culture. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just bringing that forward, that this is your reality. And that which you don't like, you have placed that upon me. So this is zulm upon zulm. One is to give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makhluk, that's already zulm. And then if you had, first of all, attributing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala children, that's already zulm. And then say from those children, they're female, that's more zulm. And it's more zulm because the mushrikeen in Makkah, they didn't like that for themselves. Meaning they're trying to say that when Allah is choosing creation, He's creating daughters. And then the mushrikeen, the argument, when they were asked, why do you kill daughters? They go, because God's chosen boys for us. So then we're keeping the daughters. So they're saying that the Creator is choosing boys for you and girls for Himself. All this also reveals that the people who are non-Muslims, right, who don't have the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they sometimes, obviously they don't have an alternative that they could give us, like to Islam. So then they go to lower measures. They start to try to defame Islamic concepts. And then but then whatever they throw at Islam, if you look really into it, it's something they're doing themselves. You get it? So the negativity that they would try to throw at Islam is something that they would be involved in themselves. Meaning that their arguments will be very shallow. You have to look past the overall argument they're making and look into it, and you'll realize that they're full of issues themselves, and they're trying to place that on Muslims. So similarly with the mushrikeen here. Then after that, أَوَ مَن يُنَشَّأُ فِي الْحِلْيَةِ وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرِ مُبِينٍ. Aren't they created for jewelry, and in argumentations they're not clear? It's telling a reality about females. That it says that, you're trying to attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the ones who are created for jewelry. It's talking that women are created for jewelry. And also in arguments, they're not clear. Just to talk about these 2 points. Jewelry, because women have a different nature. They have a nature of beauty, beautifying themselves. And it's something that, because Islam is Deen al-Fitrah. And it likes that. If that's what their nature is, that's what their nature is. And it applauds that. Like, I'll give you an example of that. Like, our ulama have written that, if you see like a hand of a man, and if you see a hand of a woman's hand should be different than a hand of a man. How? She should have at least some mehndi on. She should have some bracelet on, that if she's just showing her hand, you can know that's a girl's hand. Understand? So keeping that nature of theirs. Understand? But what's happening in this is what's happening in non-Muslim society. They're being unjust to the woman by trying to make the woman into a man. Right? They keep telling the woman to try to compete with the man constantly. There's no way that a woman is going to turn into a man. So it's very unjust. You're doing zulm upon her, but to keep trying to make her into a man, like telling her to get into all those professions that men do and then do good in them. If men could do it, you could do it, and then try to make them compete. You're just doing zulm and zulm upon on a man. This is something that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like. You get the lanat of Allah. Whenever a boy is trying to act like a girl, or a girl is trying to act like a boy, it is a curse of Allah. There's many acts that we do in the world that you have lanat of Allah. Lanat means that He is distant you from His mercy. And that's one of them. So Allahumma hafazna min. Then, and in the argument, she stays back. Meaning the idea is that anything that's tough, ladies are created different. So if there's like a battle, who are we going to send forward? Tell like our mothers and daughters to go forward. We're like in the back. Let us know. Need any help? Need some snacks? We'll come get it to you. No, we're gonna go forward, and our ladies are gonna be in the back. Also, if there's a big argumentation, we're gonna be put forward. So they won't make women don't like that. They like to, it's not part of their nature. It's the nature of man to be outward in that kind of a way. So women shouldn't have to try to lose their nature, and this whole movement and trying to make them lose their nature, it's completely unjust. Okay. Then moving on. وَجَعَلُوا الْمَلَائِكَةَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ إِنَاثًا. And they have made the angels, those who are the servants of Ar-Rahman, Inatha. First of all, they said they're His creation, they're His children, na'udhu billah, the angels, and then they're also female. أَشَهِدُوا خَلْقَهُمْ. Did they witness their creation? These mushrikeen who are saying that they are His daughters, did they witness that? And very interesting after that. سَتُكْتَبُ شَهَادَتُهُمْ. We're going to write down their witness. Allah Ta'ala saying that, you saying that, they're my daughters. We're going to write that down. They're my daughters. وَيُسْأَلُونَ. And then we're going to ask you. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, we're just going to ask you for it. So it's talking about this thing that, it's human being, logically, we are a very logical creature. We like to make sense out of things. And this is very illogical what they're doing. All right? They have no proof of this. Not in revelation, not from science, not from anything. They just threw that. In Urdu, we say Hawaii fire. Like it's just, it's like an arrow in the air. Okay. Then the next verse. وَقَالُوا, and they say, لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُمْ. Another thing the mushrikeen would say, if the most merciful wanted, we wouldn't have worshipped them. The idols, the false gods. That if Allah wanted, see that argument? It's a complete lame argument. Non-Muslims would make that. They say, if Allah SWT wanted, then I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing. That's not an argument. مَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. When they say that argument, that if Allah SWT wanted, there would have been no mushriks, there would have been no evil in the world, right? مَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. They have no proof of that. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. They are just in conjectures. What's a conjecture? Conjecture is just to make up things. You know what a conjecture is? Conjecture is like something you have no proof. Just what is that? Give me who wants to give me a nice English word for that? Give me something nicer than a conjecture.
Fake news.
Huh?
Fake news. Fake news.
Fake news is conjecture, definitely. But give me a solid word. Give me a nice word for conjecture. So these mushrikeen, they had the habit. Now remember, this mushrikeen, we have that habit around us. May Allah protect me and you that we don't have people of conjecture. Are we people of conjecture? Conjecture means that you say, look, you should either say something because it's in science, right? There's some dalil, some proof, some witnesses. Or even as religion, we have text. We have a very solid text. And whenever we say a religious thing, we're substantiated with text. And then there's conjecture. So they were in the problem of conjectures. And there are people, na'uzubillah, as I said, that the non-Muslims, the accusation they throw at us, in all cases, obviously all accusations are wrong, but they are involved in the same accusations that they throw at us. They are involved in conjectures, big time. Sometimes they look at us religious people and they go, you guys believe in all this? Right? Like as assuming that we're like illogical people, right? You're believing in all this, right? And then if you go back behind the scenes about them, they're in a whole lot of conjecture. They have no evidence for it. Sometimes even Muslims. People who start statements like this, I think this, I feel it's this way. Sometimes you could say, I think this or I feel this way, and you might be right. But in most cases, it's conjecture. Like sometimes people say about deen, somebody might say something like, right? Like they're talking about deen, they're completely wrong on what their concepts of deen, but they go, मुझे तो बस यही समझ में मुझे बस ये समझ में आता है. Now, just because you understand something like that, does that really mean that's what if your understanding is against the Quran? Then what? Right? What if your understanding is against like evidences? Right? So people who like to live that way, and people who usually accuse religion of conjecture, they're usually the victims of conjecture. Their life is full of conjecture. Allahumma hafazna, may Allah protect me and you. Saying a conjecture and then wholeheartedly believing in it. Then this is not suitable for a human being. So the mushrikeen of Makkah had this attribute. Then the last two verses for today's dars. Am ataynahum kitaban, that okay, all these things that mushriks say, doesn't have to be mushrik. It could be any non-Muslim community or Muslim community who's a bit astray. All the things that they say, have they been given this in a book prior? Where are they deriving this from? See, in Islam, when we say anything, we have a very high-level, solid proof system. We have a hierarchy. Everything comes from Quran. Then second stage, it comes from Hadith. Then it comes through consensus. Then it comes through Qiyas. So all these people who say conjectural things, the question is to them, not to us. We have solid evidence. The question is to them that do you have a book that you're latching these evidences from?
Fabricated. The word.
Fabricated. Yeah, fabricated.
Made up stuff.
Made up stuff. You make up something, no proof, and then you believe in it wholeheartedly, like your full iman is on it. This usually is the victim, people who are not firm on the deen, you end up in like that. Because a human being is, by his nature, he likes to believe in stuff. He likes to explain stuff. He likes to understand stuff. He wants an explanation. So if you're not connected to the Quran, right, that you're going to make up false stories on every event that you see, and then you're going to start to believe in it because you love believing in stuff. So Allahumma hafazna. Allah SWT make us of that. The last verse for today, but rather, they say, the mushrikeen, when the mushrikeens were asked, about their conjectures, like, hey, you say this, that, you have no evidence. What are you talking? Where do you get all this from? They would say this answer: we found our forefathers upon this shariat, meaning this is a law that we found our forefathers doing. وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ, and we are upon their traces, on their footsteps, fully guided on their footsteps. So let's talk about, this is the last verse of today's dars. Let's talk a little bit about this concept of following your forefathers. This concept of following your forefathers, it comes a couple of places in the Quran, okay? There's a big misunderstanding. Islam advocates following your forefathers as long as they're guided. So the rule is they have to be guided. There's a community, Muslim community amongst us, they're known as Ahl Hadith. Have you heard of that? Ahl Hadith. We're not. We are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We're people who follow Sunnah and Jama'ah, but there's a group, Muslim group, you find them in different countries in the world, Ahl Hadith. So people like Ansar, they don't have a sound, and sometimes they misinterpret. So like this verse, you would notice that they would misinterpret these types of verses. When it says, don't follow your forefathers, they say don't follow any forefathers. So all the Sahaba, Tabi'een, Imam Abu Hanifa, they start to take all these forefathers. If I quote my teacher, my grand teacher, or my chain, they're not even impressed with that. They go, oh, apne baap dada ke piche laga hua hai. That's wrong. That's not the Islamic concept. Islamic concept is that if your forefathers are guided, we cherish their path. We are on the path of our forefathers. Does that make sense? But if we know from evidence that our forefathers were wrong, then we're not on that path. That's the thing. Mushrikeen in Makkah knew that their forefathers were wrong. Their actions were questionable. It wasn't evidence proof. They still follow. That's what the Quran is condemning. Do you see how the Ahl Hadith community misinterprets this? So they would just take that because the Quran constantly says that don't follow your forefathers. So then they stamp it on the majority, the mainstream Muslims who do follow all the A'immah and their Imams, and they have their chains. They go, oh look, you guys are just like the mushrik. They follow forefathers. You guys also follow your forefathers. That's your misreading. That's because you never understood this verse. So it's not our fault you didn't understand this verse. Now you made this mess in the world. You give the wrong interpretation of not following your forefathers. And now we have to clean it up. So, but you guys understand the true meaning of, yeah. So whenever the Quran says don't follow your forefathers, it means those forefathers that are not guided. If your forefathers are guided, then you follow them. In fact, let me add something to that. It's very important that you follow your forefathers. Very important. For example, when we look in history, we take inspiration, right? Because people were more closer, the Sahaba, the ulama, the sulaha, they're more closer to the Prophet ﷺ. They're more pious, they're more accomplished than us. So we follow them, we take inspiration. That's very important. Because even a Nabi, a prophet, he's a role model. But he's masoom, he's a sinless role model. So you can relate to him. He's the ideal, but you still can't be 100% him because he's sinless. So who's going to be your role model? Your role model is all the people who come after the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they're going to be like normal people, non-Sahaba, non-Tabi'in. You have to look at those models and then follow them. What did they do? How did they learn the deen? How did they follow the deen? You have to take inspiration from non-Masoom role models. See, one is Masoom role models, all the Prophet Nuh, Prophet Ibrahim, these are all your sinless role models. Then you have normal model, and you need the normal. As a human, you need a model, and you need a model that you can relate to. You get it? You know, sometimes people overly praise prophets, of course, without a doubt, it says in the Quran, they're role models. But that doesn't mean that we ignore the history and our guided forefathers. That's the point that I'm getting at. Okay, this is a major thing today. And then we are, so the Mushrikeen was saying that we are upon the path of our forefathers and we are on their footsteps, fully guided. That's it. Sadaqallahu Maulana Azim. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah al-Azim. If there's a question, I can take it. Now, what time is Salat?
It's not.
It's time already. We can take a question. Also, we should do some zikr. Let's make some zikr, inshallah. Today, something we're going to add is that we're going to do zikr. First, I'll take some questions.
Not question, we just need clarification. First, there's a question on it, then I need clarification. So it's Ahl Hadith, what do they call the
Salafi?
Salafi, and the other one you just
Ahl Hadith.
Ahl Hadith.
They're the same.
They're the same thing?
They're the same.
Okay. I thought Salafi still follow some kind of.
No, they're the same. They're all different. They're all different, but they're the same. They go by, you call them Salafi, Ahl Hadith, Ashabu Zawahir, literalists. They always existed in Islam. Who take a very literalist approach and they deviate from the mainstream understanding of Islam, and they stay on the border and just take a literal approach to everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, so it means that, just literally. And sometimes they miss out on the spirit of Islam. That's the issue.
Because I know a relative of mine, like always posting stuff, always posting hadith. I didn't know that person is an hadith. And
it would be, because if he's saying things that are against the madhabs, and you get it? Like, I think that means that he's just cherry picking a hadith, just throwing in the public like that. So obviously, there's a lot of people who you'll find around you who are influenced by that thought. Okay? Yeah, by the literalist.
Sometimes 50% they may be posting right stuff, but again.
Oh, yeah. They're always posting the right stuff because they're hadith. They're always posting the right stuff because they're always mentioning hadith. There's nothing wrong with hadith. Lekin they're fooling the public because they don't understand what that hadith is. Knowing the words of the hadith and knowing what the hadith means are two separate things. They're just posting words. By them posting words, they could be doing harm. If the public is going to misinterpret and they'll go astray, all that brunt is upon them because they posted that hadith without for the public to misunderstand. They'll go away from the aqwal of the mujtahideen because of it. And so they're deviating. So that will be a form of deviation. So it's good that it's a hadith, but it's bad because the public is going to get a negative effect through it.
But most people, they think, they're posting hadith, so it's nothing wrong.
Yeah, so the general public who doesn't come to gatherings like this, they're going to they're victim to it. As soon as they see a hadith, they're going to just go for it.
But see, when you started the lecture today, you talked about 4 hierarchies, Quran, hadith, and
Aqwal al-Sahaba and Aqwal al-Mujtahideen.
Golden era, and then
Mujtahideen.
But but the golden era, the Sahaba and Tabi'in, they didn't write books. So if you take them out of the picture, I mean, these people, I don't understand how they can go straight to the Quran and Sunnah and try
without the Sahaba.
No, I mean Sahabas, we don't see the Sahabas. We're seeing the ulamas, right? Yeah. And we're seeing the fuqahas. So we're following the fuqahas. So, but if you take their argument that you don't believe in the fuqahas, if they're saying go straight to the hadith and Quran and hadith, how can they get all these things out of the Quran and hadith themselves? How they know how to pray and kitne sunnat parni, kitne. The rules and regulations that
the first time Islamic law is written is with the Council of Abu Hanifa.
Right. Yeah. So I mean me being a layman, trying to understand them, how are you getting that out of them? If you're going straight.
No, well, you know what happens to them usually? They actually end up they उनको ना गलत फहमी हो जाती है with ulama and proper learning. वहाँ से गलत फहमी. And then sometimes the Hadith group, they end up chanting certain things like, oh, we are upon, and it's something that your human logic relates to it. That, oh, okay, don't follow no one, just go directly from the Quran. So it's something that a human logic appeals to it, but it's just a trap of shaitan.
But like daily things like banking and dealing with daily life things and like banking and dealing with people and how to pray.
वो सब नहीं है.
How are you going to get
They नहीं है उनके पास, नहीं है. They don't have all of that. So they just thrive off just making us look bad. They thrive off that. They've always existed, literalists from early on in Islam, thousands of years, and they're all over.
Sorry, I don't know. Adnan Bhai took most of the time, so I don't know whether you have time for any other questions.
No, you can. Go ahead.
Okay. You don't have to answer now, but so we have we know that the Quran is from Loh Mahfuz. Loh Mahfuz is the mother tablet, and from there the Quran is extracted, like for us. So there are some events which happened in during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of certain Sahabis. Their names were mentioned, or some events were mentioned. So that is already there in Loh Mahfuz, or it will be written, or I don't
everything
know.
There. All of the qadar is in Loh Mahfuz. Yeah. Even our future actions are already written there. Even whether we're going to make it to Jannah or Jahannam is already written.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. But just this is because qadar is the knowledge of Allah. Okay? The knowledge of Allah is so great, but we haven't even taken those actions. Okay.